Wait, before you decide this is just another Arctic horror story, hear me. The explosion wasn't the scary part. The scary part is that the company planned it, and whatever crawled up from the ice was already inside the perimeter. I broke one rule for 10 seconds, and that's when the ground started walking beneath us. If you want the full truth, stay with me to the end. Like, subscribe, and share this, seriously. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. Today, I watched the horizon get erased, wiped clean by a vertical pillar of white fire. I'm writing this from a stolen snowcat, miles from anything that would count as help. The only reason I'm breathing is because I broke the one rule they hammered into us from day one. The company tried to erase me. They pushed a button and turned my station into a crater. But that's not what keeps my hands shaking. It's what came out of the ice before the bomb dropped. If I don't say this now, no one will ever know what really happened out here. I broke the cardinal rule of deep bore monitoring, and I opened a door that was never meant to unlock. You ever wonder why a corporate entity pays 6 figures for techs to sit in a pressurized metal box 200 meters north of Fairbanks? It's not to watch the ice melt. We're here to keep the acoustic dampeners running. That's the job. That's the only thing that matters, whether we understand it or not. I'm Kenneth, Ken to everyone who doesn't sign my paychecks, lead seismic technician at Relay Station Echo 4, a raised, pressurized structure bolted into Alaskan permafrost on thick steel pilings. Central monitoring hub packed with server racks, generator shed out back, chain link fence around the compound. Tonight, outside the reinforced glass, the world is a solid wall of gray static, a full whiteout, wind howling hard enough to make the bolts in the walls groan. You can't see 10 feet past the window. Out here, missing protocol doesn't just get you fired, it gets you frozen solid before you reach the fence line. That's why I rely on equipment. I'm rational. I trust data. I trust green telemetry scrolling across black monitors. I do not trust shadows in snow, and I definitely don't trust paranoid contractors who haven't slept. There are only 2 of us at Echo 4 this rotation, me and a field mechanic named Vance who hates the cold like it personally insulted him. Vance is built like a brawler and acts like the world owes him warmth. He cares about finishing his rotation, taking hazard pay, and getting back somewhere his breath doesn't freeze into his beard. He has no patience for delicate calibration, which makes him a terrible partner for 2 months in a metal tube. This morning, we sat in the hub with instant coffee, waiting out the blizzard. The station's sensory baseline pressed in on us like a weight. The floor vibrated, always. The deep-bore dampeners are sonic emitters driven into bedrock beneath us. Corporate says they emit a low-frequency wave to stabilize permafrost around drill sites. The side effect is a constant vibration you feel more than hear. It sits behind your eyes. It makes your teeth ache if you think about it. My coffee cup always carries tiny concentric rings from the micro trimmers, like the liquid can't ever truly rest. Vance paced by the airlock, kicking snow from his boots and complaining as usual. I'm telling you, Ken, they drilled these nodes too deep. Vance grumbled, peeling off thick gloves and tossing them on a folding chair. Every time I go near the southern perimeter vents, that smell comes back. Worse today with the low pressure. I didn't look away from my monitors. Vance snorted. Methane smells like garbage. This smells like rotten eggs and old copper. I was already irritated. The dampener's low-frequency thrum created a massive baseline interference across my seismic arrays. Thick bands of green static cluttered every feed. It was like trying to hear a whisper in a stadium. I'd filed 3 requests to corporate dispatch, brief dampener reductions so I could recalibrate sensors. Every request was denied instantly with protocol warnings. Vance took a sip of coffee, grimaced, then the proximity alarm shrieked. Sharp electronic pain cutting clean through the constant hum. Red text flashed. Outer perimeter motion, Zone 3. Zone 3 was the northern fence line, 50 yards from the hub. Vance sighed, already turning toward the weapon locker. Unbelievable! In a whiteout? He wrapped the locker handle. Probably a grizzly looking for shelter, or a moose scratching the fence. He reached for the rifle. I'll fire warning shots into the berm. I snapped. Hold! My hands were already moving. Do not go out there blind. Let me check the seismic signature first. I want to know what it is before anyone opens a door. Vance froze, annoyed. It's a bear, Ken. What else would it be? I pulled up raw feed for Zone 3, filtering wind shear and ambient vibration as best I could. The impacts resolved on my screen, and my stomach tightened. The data was wrong in a way that made my skin crawl. I've logged wildlife movements for 6 years. A grizzly reads as chaotic 4-point impacts, heavy, dragging, organic. A moose hits sharp and uneven. This was neither. The amplitude suggested something weighing 2 tons, and the impacts were perfectly rhythmic. 2-point, thud, 2 seconds, thud. It looked like a pendulum striking frozen earth with mechanical precision, clean spikes cutting through static like knife cuts. Vance, I said, voice dropping, that is not a bear. He came behind my chair, arms crossed, watching the screen like it owed him an explanation. Equipment? He asked. One of the drill rigs tear loose? I shook my head. No, it's moving, tracking parallel to the fence line, taking steps. But the weight distribution is wrong. Nothing that heavy can walk on 2 legs without sinking waist deep. I flipped to exterior cameras for Zone 3. White vortex, fence barely visible as dark crosshatch blur. Thermal imaging showed nothing but uniform cold. Cameras are blind, I muttered. Ice against the lenses, dampener noise masking fine details. Vance waved it away and headed for coffee. Then it's a glitch. Wind slamming metal against pilings. You stare at screens too long, Ken. You start seeing ghosts and machines. I didn't answer because the thuds kept coming, steady, deliberate, like something searching for a weak point in our perimeter. I needed clean data. I needed the signature without the dampener's muddy baseline. My eyes fell on the manual override for Node 4, the dampener directly beneath Zone 3. Corporate protocols were tattooed in my head. Never interrupt frequency, never adjust outputs. But I'm the lead tech. Threat assessment is on me. I'm dialing it down, I said, hand on the switch. Vance turned sharply. Dial what down? The dampener. 10 seconds. I'll restore before logs register. Dispatch will have your head, he snapped. I flipped the safety cover anyway and turned Node 4 to 0.
The change was instant and wrong. The bone-deep vibration vanished, the ripples in my coffee smoothed to glass. The sudden absence felt like cabin pressure dropping. My ears popped. Silence became heavy, oppressive. I stared at the monitor. The thick green static bands disappeared into a flat, clean baseline. And the rhythmic impacts stopped immediately. Nothing. No movement. Vance laughed, harsh and relieved. See? Ghost in the machine. Feedback loop. You turned it off, the ghost goes away. Corporate will dock you a week's pay for breaking protocol over a software hiccup. Embarrassment warmed my cheeks. Vance was right. Logical answer. I reached to restore node 4. My fingertips brushed the dial. Then the generator hum dipped. Overhead lights flickered as a massive power draw hit the grid. I froze. On the seismic display, node 4 didn't register a footstep. It pinned. Green line shot straight up into flashing red and stayed there. A sustained, catastrophic spike of kinetic energy. Not an impact, a rupture. The inner compound alarm shrieked. Vance yelled, "Ken, look at the camera!" I snapped to the feed. For one thin second, the whiteout curtain parted. The chain link fence was intact. Nothing climbed it. Nothing broke through. But 20 yards inside our perimeter, the ground was gone. Snow and permafrost collapsed inward, opening a jagged sinkhole that widened in real time. Chunks of frozen earth the size of cars tumbled into absolute blackness. The realization hit like a fist. The threat wasn't outside the fence. It had been pacing beneath it. Vance moved toward the airlock with sudden purpose, adrenaline flushing his face. I couldn't move. My brain refused to accept what my eyes confirmed. Vance ripped a Parker from its hook, grabbed the rifle, racked the bolt, metal clack that made me jump in the silent hub. "Vance, stop!" I said, voice thin. Node 4 was still down, leaving a dead zone beneath us. "You can't go out there. The perimeter's compromised. That hole just opened." "Methane pocket blowout," he snapped, shoving a magazine into his pocket. "I told you they drilled too deep. Pressure built, ice fractured, it caved. If that hole expands, it takes out the junction by the generator shed. If we lose heat, we die." "Methane blowouts leave a thermal signature," I argued, pulling infrared overlays. "Expanding gas would show. Look, hole is bed cold, same as surface." Vance zipped his parka to his chin, hood up. "Your sensors glitched. You proved it. Dampener masked stress fractures. You cut frequency, tension released, ground collapsed. Basic physics." He pointed at me with the rifle like a lecture. "I'm securing the junction. You monitor comms. Don't touch another dial." Before I could answer, he hit the pneumatic airlock release and stepped inside. The inner door sealed behind him with a heavy thud. I grabbed the radio mic with shaking hands. "Vance, radio check," I said. Static hissed, then his voice, muffled by mask and wind. "Read you. Cycling outer door now. Visibility's 5 feet. I'll follow the safety line to the northern perimeter." I routed processing power to Zone 3, trying to filter wind noise so I could watch ground stability around the sinkhole. "Keep your radio keyed," I ordered. "If I tell you to step back, you step back immediately. Understand?" Yeah, he grumbled. His GPS blip crawled across the compound map. Cameras were useless, pure white chaos, so my world became telemetry.
his boot impacts clean and messy and human, and the void's silent hunger beneath.
"I'm 20 yards from the edge," Vance said. Wind roared through his mic like a freight train. "It's massive, Ken. Fence is hanging over nothing. Sheer drop-off." I watched his blip inch closer to the black rim on my display. "Do not approach the lip," I warned. "Rim is unstable." He breathed hard. "Can't see bottom. Pitch black. Storm is filling it with snow." Then he paused. Static burst. "That smell! I told you! It's overwhelming!" "Methane?" I asked, though my gut already knew. Vance's voice lowered, suddenly unsure. "Not methane. Rotten eggs and old copper, like blood and sulfur, like the earth is rotten." On my monitor, the green line twitched, tiny spike, then another precisely 2 seconds later. Thud. Pause. Thud. My stomach dropped. The rhythmic impacts were back. I adjusted depth filters. With node 4 still down, I had an unfiltered look beneath the station. The spikes weren't surface impacts. They registered 40 feet down, rising fast. "Vance," I said, forcing calm I didn't have. "Back away from the sinkhole now. Follow the safety line back." He argued, flashlighting the edge. "I see something reflecting. Looks like sheared casing of a bore pipe." I shouted, "It isn't a pipe. The anomaly is directly under you." The thuds accelerated. 2 seconds, 1 second, half. A heavy charge locking onto his transponder with perfect math. "I don't hear anything," Vance said, fear creeping into his tone. "Wind's too loud. What do you mean, beneath me?" "It's coming up," I yelled. "Run! Drop the rifle and run!" On the seismic graph, spikes merged into a jagged red wall. "Wait, the ground's shifting," Vance gasped. "Ice is vibrating. I can feel it through my boots. Something is—" His sentence died under a sound that shredded the world. Not a roar, not grinding, a deafening echolocation click, like steel blocks slammed inside an echo chamber, layered over a frequency that stabbed my inner ear. My console limiter shattered, speakers popped. Silence. I screamed into dead air. "Vance, report!" No answer. His GPS blip moved, down, 10 feet, 20, 40. The depth gauge spun like a lie. He wasn't falling, he was being pulled, 80 feet below surface. Then the transponder cut out, black screen. I slammed the console, roaring his name until my throat burned. Rational me evaporated. I grabbed an emergency flare and a thermal coat and bypassed airlock cycling, slamming manual override so both doors opened at once. The storm hit like concrete. Ice crystals stabbed my face. I stumbled onto the exterior grating blind, grabbing the yellow safety line and hauling myself toward Zone 3 through roaring white nothing. I counted paces by memory. Then the stench hit. Sulfur, old copper, deep rot, so strong it made my eyes water behind goggles. I lit the flare. Red light carved a small circle in the blizzard. I stood at the sinkhole's edge, 30 feet wide, jagged ice and frozen earth. I held the flare over the void. The light barely reached down, but it revealed something that turned my blood to ice. The hole wasn't a collapsed cavity. It was a smooth, perfectly cylindrical shaft bored straight into permafrost. It hadn't caved, it had been dug. Vance's rifle lay in the snow inches from the edge, straps snapped clean.
No blood, no torn fabric, just boot prints to the lip, and then nothing, as if he'd been plucked away with surgical speed. I stared into blackness and realized my boots were crunching. I was making vibrations in a dead zone. I scrambled back, panic overriding reason, and sprinted blind toward the station. I crashed into the airlock, slammed emergency close, and collapsed, gasping. Inside the hub, warm hum from remaining dampeners returned like false comfort. Monitors glowed steady green, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. The sanctuary was compromised. I needed answers. I ripped through root directories and broke every corporate rule that still mattered. Restricted files weren't geology schematics. They were containment protocols. Clinical text made my stomach hollow. Echo 4 wasn't seismic monitoring. The dampeners weren't stabilizing ice. They broadcast an ultra-low frequency barrier, an acoustic fence. The company had discovered an ancient tunnel network during exploratory drilling 10 years ago. They woke something blind and aggressive that hunted by seismic vibration. The dampeners overloaded its sensory organs, keeping it deep. I stared at my hands, shaking. I'd turned Node 4 off. I hadn't opened a door. I'd rung a dinner bell. I reached to restore Node 4. Then the inner foundation alarm screamed. The floor's comforting hum hitched into sudden silence, and I felt it. A slow, heavy scrape against steel pilings beneath the hub. A mass dragging itself along our supports. The building groaned as if the pilings were being tested, wrapped, measured. I froze, staring at gray linoleum like it might split. I couldn't even shift in my chair. If the wheels rolled, it would hear. The scrape stopped. Silence returned, thick and listening. I needed help. I needed dispatch. The satellite uplink terminal sat 20 feet away. 20 feet felt like a continent. My boots were loud. I unlaced them, slipped into wool socks, and began to move toe first across the hollow floor, distributing weight like a thief in his own home. Cold bit my heels. I reached the uplink and flipped the red safety cover. The SAT terminal booted slowly, cruelly. 10%, 30%. My breath hogged the screen. I kept glancing at the floor, expecting impact. Nothing. 80. Connection established. A crisp chime, then a voice. Eris, corporate dispatch. Too clean, too calm. Relay station Echo 4, central dispatch. We're receiving an unauthorized encrypted uplink. State your emergency. Hearing a human voice nearly broke me. I kept my voice a whisper. Terrified sound would vibrate walls. Eris, this is Ken. Catastrophic breach. I need immediate armed evacuation. Vance is gone. Something came up from the permafrost. A pause. Keyboard clicks. Confirm status, she said. Vance biometric telemetry has flatlined. Where is he? I swallowed sulfur and grief. Pulled into the earth. Sinkhole inside perimeter. Hostile biological anomaly beneath the station. I accessed restricted files. I know what dampeners really are. I expected panic. I got ice. Confirm your terminal inputs, Aries said, tone clinical. Automated telemetry shows a sustained drop in acoustic output at node 4. Did you manually adjust the dampener safety limiters? She didn't ask how I survived. She asked about the dial. Rage burned through my fear. I turned node 4 down for 10 seconds to clean up static. I hissed. I was doing my job. The typing stopped. Protocols are absolute, she said. Echo 4 is a level 1 containment cap. The warming permafrost has destabilized a subterranean ecosystem that predates recorded history. The specimens hunt by kinetic vibration. The sonic fence keeps them disoriented and buried. My hands clenched. Get me out, I begged. Send a team. Ares didn't hesitate. Impossible. Helicopter rotors or tracked convoys would act as a beacon, attracting every specimen in the tunnel network. We cannot risk a mass breach that reaches populated infrastructure. The truth landed heavy and final. You aren't sending anyone, I whispered. You're leaving me here. We are initiating the Alpha contingency, Eris replied, voice of a corporation solving an equation. Echo 4 is equipped with a remote failsafe. I am bypassing generator cooling regulators, initiating a thermal purge, reactor overload to critical mass. The resulting event will incinerate the facility and melt permafrost within 200 yards. Rapid flash freeze will create a new sterile containment cap. I couldn't breathe. You can't. I'm inside. Sequence is locked, she said. You have 3 hours. Use whatever means necessary to keep specimens within the blast radius. Do not leave on foot. Your footsteps would draw specimens outward and compromise the cap. Thank you for your service. The line clicked dead. My screen flashed red. Thermal purge initiated. T-02:59:59. The timer began to bleed away, second by second. I was a cork they were about to burn into place. I stood in socks, staring at red numbers, listening to the storm and the sudden, horrible quiet inside. Then the floor trembled. Rapid, localized shaking under my feet. The creature had heard my scream. Heavy, rhythmic tapping struck the steel foundation beneath me. Thud, thud, thud. The linoleum flexed upward with each hit. It wasn't brushing pilings anymore. It was testing the floor, looking for the way in. I slid backward, slow, putting server racks between myself and the buckling spot. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed was worse, tight, waiting. Frost began to creep over metal surfaces as heat systems struggled. Then the scrape resumed, but it moved laterally, away from me, toward the back of the facility, toward the generator shed, the loudest heartbeat on the compound. I crept to the rear window. Floodlights threw a hazy cone into the blizzard, barely holding back white chaos. For a moment, nothing. Then the generator shed doors exploded outward, sheared off hinges like wet paper. A pale shape surged up from beneath the shed, tearing through corrugated floor. I finally saw it. An armored monstrosity evolved in darkness. Translucent white segmented hide, joints built for burrowing through bedrock. No eyes, a smooth wedge head lined with porous sensory pits, shovel-like claws designed to carve earth. It attacked the generator like prey, not machinery, ripping metal casing to reach the vibrating core. It clicked, a brutal echolocation blast that rattled the hub's reinforced glass and made my teeth ache. Sparks erupted, black diesel smoke billowed, the hub lights flickered and died, emergency strobes pulsed crimson. And the most terrifying part?
The dampener's hum began to spin down. Without the generator, the sonic fence was failing. Silence fell across the station like a death sentence. The bone-deep vibration that had filled my skull for weeks was gone. The fence was down. The ecosystem beneath us was about to wake. The purge timer glowed, 0241XX. If I stayed, I'd burn. If I ran outside, I'd freeze or get pulled under like Vance. I needed a third option. I knew the wiring. Under the hub was a sublevel, the sub, housing analog overrides for the deep bore array. If I reached it, I could dump emergency battery power directly into Node 4 and the PA system. Not a fence, an overload, a point-blank, ultra-low frequency shockwave. If the creature's senses were its weapon, I could turn them into its weakness, disoriented long enough to steal the snowcat and outrun the blast radius. A suicidal plan, but it was the only move left. Problem? The hatch to the sub lay 50 yards down a steel-grated corridor, past crew quarters and mess hall. In silence, every step would be a drumbeat. Socks wouldn't be enough on hollow steel. I raided the supply closet by the airlock and found industrial expanding foam and duct tape. I sat on the freezing floor and sprayed foam onto my boot treads until they hissed and swelled like living things. Before it cured, I wrapped soles in layer after layer of tape, compressing foam into dense cushions. The ripping tape sounded like thunder. I paused between strips, listening for impacts. None. When finished, my boots looked ridiculous, taped clubs. But when I stepped, the floor stayed quiet. I grabbed a heavy wrench as my pathetic weapon, zipped my coat, and opened the corridor door with agonizing care. A microscopic hinge squeak made my blood spike. Outside, through the walls, I heard the creature crunching around the hall, circling, mapping. I stepped onto the corridor grating under pulsing red strobes. Cold bit harder here. My breath fogged and froze against my mask. I walked heel to toe, absorbing impact through knees. The metal contracted in the extreme cold, prone to random pings. I scanned for loose panels like they were landmines. I passed the dark crew quarters, past the mess hall, tables and chairs lit in bloody flashes. The only sound was blizzard howl and the creature's slow scrape against the outer wall, inches from my shoulder. It clicked, short, sharp sonar, making bolts vibrate. It was mapping the interior, searching for warm, moving mass. It tracked me even through dampened steps, sensing subtle shifts in the station's weight. At the corridor end, the hatch wheel waited. I knelt, hand shaking, and turned it a fraction at a time, terrified of metal on metal grind. 3 minutes for half a rotation. The latch released with a dull clunk. The scraping outside stopped. It heard. I yanked the hatch, slipped into the shaft, and pulled it shut above me. The sub was pitch black, colder than any place I'd ever stood. I clicked on a low lumen pin light. Weak beam cut through cables, pipes, bulkheads slick with frost. My joints stiffened instantly. I ducked under a pipe, moved toward the analog drill console, old, heavy metal with physical switches and dials, meant to work when everything else died. I wedged the pin light between my teeth, hands fumbling in thick gloves. I reached for the auxiliary routing toggle, then my gloves snagged a metal clipboard left precariously on the console edge. Time slowed. I lunged to catch it, but cold made my reflexes sluggish. The clipboard slipped, fell, and hit steel grating with a catastrophic clatter that echoed through the shaft and down into pilings like a bell.
I froze, nausea blooming. 1 second of silence. Then the world exploded. A concussive impact slammed the sub's outer hull, throwing me off my feet. The creature hurled its 2-ton mass into reinforced plating. Steel buckled inward with a scream. Rivets popped like gunfire. It shrieked, sustained echolocation blast that ruptured the console's glass dials and drove me to my knees. I crawled backward in the dark. Penlight fell and rolled away. Wind screamed through new gaps. I hit a storage locker, ripped it open, threw myself inside, and yanked the door shut. Then the sub wall finally tore open. Blizzard poured in, turning the sub into a localized whiteout. Through locker slats, I saw the creature pull its bulk into the cramped space, armor scraping ceiling pipes. It clicked in rhythmic bursts, sonar mapping every corner. Slow now. Deliberate. It knew prey was trapped. Its head turned, featureless and blind, and locked onto the locker. It crawled closer until the stench, sulfur, copper, decay flooded the slats and choked me. It pressed its head against the locker door. The metal trembled. I held my breath until my lungs burned, but the truth was worse. I could be silent and still, and it would still find me. It didn't need my breathing. It needed my heart. My pulse hammered, loud in my skull, vibrating my ribs like a drum. The creature listened to it through metal. Then claws rose. A locker door buckled inward with a shriek. A claw punched through steel and stopped 3 inches from my nose. Pale, translucent tip coated in frozen mud and dark blood that wasn't mine. The smell nearly made me gag. The sensory pits on its skull pulsed, tasting the tremors of my panic. It clicked, a trill of anticipation, and raised its other limb to peel the door away. I had 1 second left to live. Rationality died. Instinct took over. I gripped the wrench, not to fight armor, but to lie. I waited for the fraction of a second. The creature shifted weight, pulling back to strike again. I hurled the wrench past it with everything I had. It hit the far bulkhead with a violent clang, then ricocheted into hollow ventilation pipes, exploding into chaotic metallic percussion. In the sub's acoustics, the noise was a kinetic bloom, vibration everywhere. The creature snapped away instantly, sensory pits flaring, abandoning the locker. It lunged at the pipes, claws shredding steel grating. I didn't watch it hunt the wrench. The moment its bulk cleared the locker, I kicked out the ruined door, rolled onto the freezing floor, and ran, boots muffled, heart screaming. Snow swirled through the breach. I slipped on ice, but kept moving toward the console, knowing the creature would realize the trick and turn back. I slammed into the analog console. No penlight, no time. I ripped off gloves with my teeth and spat them aside. Bare fingers screamed against freezing metal switches. I found the auxiliary routing toggle by touch and threw it up. A low hum vibrated in the console, battery power redirected. Next, the safety limiters. Instead of flipping breakers, I grabbed the limiter housing and tore it down, snapping locking pins. No caps, no regulators, raw emergency power waiting to dump into node 4. Behind me, through snow and darkness, the creature turned away from mangled pipes. Its head swept, recalibrating. Then it locked onto me, the warm, moving mass at the console. It charged, claws tearing up grating. I grabbed the node 4 output dial, same dial I'd turned down earlier, and wrenched it past the red line to the absolute stop. The result wasn't sound, it was a physical event.
A point-blank, ultra-low frequency detonation, a seismic boom that slammed into the sub like an invisible explosion. Every remaining piece of glass shattered. Bulkheads groaned, rivets screamed, air ripped from my lungs and threw me backward. Warm blood poured from my ears, vision doubled. But for the creature whose entire biology was built to detect microscopic tremors, the overload was apocalypse. It shrieked with tearing agony, sensory pits rupturing in a spray of dark fluid. Its massive body spasmed, flung off the floor by involuntary convulsions. It thrashed blindly, smashing itself into pipes and walls, claws carving steel. Driven by pure panic, it surged toward the breach and squeezed out into the blizzard, gouging its own armor, then vanished downward, desperate to escape vibration. I lay on the grating, gasping, hearing only a high ringing and the deep roar I'd unleashed. The overload kept roaring, shaking the sub apart. I crawled through debris and found the ladder. Each rung felt like knives in my hands. I forced the hatch open with my shoulder and dragged myself into the corridor. Ceiling panels vibrated loose and crashed down. Walls shuddered, insulation tearing free. The station was dying under its own uncapped frequency. I stumbled back to the hub under pulsing red strobes. The satling still glowed steady blue, absurdly calm. I looked at the purge timer, T-0014.XX. 14 minutes! The corporate failsafe was almost complete. Generator shed was already overloaded toward critical mass. If the purge didn't cook me, the station's structural failure would. I staggered to the airlock and forced the door open against a warping frame. Blizzard swallowed me. I hauled myself along the safety line toward the front gates, not looking north at the sinkhole that ate Vance. The snowcat waited by the fence, half buried, orange hull like a tank in a grave. I waded through waist-deep drifts, boots heavy, breath ragged. The cab door was sealed by ice. I screamed, then slammed my shoulder against it, beating frozen metal with bloody fists. Ice cracked. I braced against the tracks and yanked. The door tore open with a metallic shriek and I fell inside. The cab was barely warmer than the storm. I lunged for ignition. No keys. Keys were locked back in the hub. I was sitting on top of a bomb with no way to start the engine. I forced myself to breathe. I was a technician. Circuits were truth. I ripped the plastic housing under the steering column and exposed a head nest of heavy-gauge wires. No knife, no tool. I bit insulation off the thick red power line and the yellow ignition wire, tasting rubber, copper, blood. Fingers numb, I jammed bare cores together. Blue sparks exploded. Pain burned my hands. Then the diesel engine roared to life, vibrating the cab like a living beast. The heater wheezed stale, warm air. The vibration was a beacon, exactly what Eris warned, kinetic energy broadcasting into permafrost. But my uncapped sonic blast was still roaring behind me, turning the ground into a nightmare for anything listening. And the purge was coming. I shoved the gear into drive and floored it. The snowcat lurched forward and smashed through chain-link gates, dragging twisted metal under the tracks. I drove blind into the whiteout, guided only by the glowing GPS compass. South. Always south. The ride was bone-jarring, tracks slamming through drifts, suspension bottoming out on uneven frozen earth. Every slip on sheer ice made my heart stop, convinced the ground would open.
The heater slowly thawed my hands in pins and needles agony that made me cry out in the empty cab. Blood dried on my face. Hearing remained muffled by relentless ringing. After what felt like an hour, the dashboard clock said 15 minutes. I slammed brakes and skidded to a halt, engine idling like a steady heartbeat. I twisted to wipe condensation from the rear window and looked north into swirling darkness. At first, nothing, just storm. Then the horizon disappeared. Clouds vaporized in a flash, so bright it turned night into shadowless noon. I threw up my arms, screaming as light burned through closed eyelids. A perfectly cylindrical column of white fire punched upward into the sky, sustained and unnatural. Not an explosion, a corporate purge. Heat hit the snowcat moments later, melting frost off windows, turning nearby drifts to slush. Then the shockwave arrived, a silent wall that rocked the vehicle on its suspension and momentarily crushed the wind into stillness. The pillar faded from white to furious orange, then to black smoke swallowed by returning storm. Echo 4 was gone. Hub, generator, sinkhole, dampeners, everything reduced to ash and a crater of boiling permafrost already flash freezing into a new sterile cap. I faced forward again, breathing hard, alive. Survival should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like dread with teeth. Aries called it a containment cap, not eradication. They didn't mean to end the problem. They meant to seal one breach. I'd seen network maps in the restricted files, dozens of relay stations across hundreds of miles, each bolted into thawing permafrost like a lid on a jar. Echo 4 wasn't unique. It was one point in a line of pressure. The ice is thinning everywhere. Climate shifts don't respect fences. The dampeners are a sonic bandage over an ancient tunnel system full of blind predators waking in the dark. The company can burn one station, then another. Eventually, they run out of bombs, or the ecosystem reaches something that can't be sealed. That's why my hands still shake. Not because they tried to kill me, though they did. Not because Vance is gone, though I can still smell sulfur when I close my eyes. It's because I know the truth now. The job was never monitoring, it was containment. I was paid to keep a wall of pain humming so something older than our maps stayed asleep. And for 10 seconds, I believed I knew better than the wall. I killed my partner with arrogance. Then I watched the company execute me like a faulty part. If you're hearing this, then at least one person knows what's under Alaska. And if you ever see a bland corporate report about thermal maintenance events in remote stations, understand, that's not weather. That's the lid being slammed back down. I'm driving south until I hit the pipeline road. I don't know what I'll say when someone finally stops me. I don't know how you explain a creature without eyes that hunts your heartbeat through steel. I don't know how you tell a world that trusts paperwork that the paperwork is the lie. But I know what I saw. I saw the permafrost open like a mouth. I saw a station's heartbeat stolen and used as bait. I saw a monster tear into a generator like it hated vibration itself. And I saw the horizon erased to keep a secret buried. The snowcat's treads keep chewing through the whiteout. Every vibration echoes down into the earth. Somewhere beneath this wasteland, something listens.